Hello. We don't know what happened. Our end, the music just stopped. So we're like, when do we start? We have no idea. Anyway, hello everybody. Welcome to another session with us on Aucademy. I am Dr. Chloe Farahar. I'm a white person with a shaved head, giant glasses, and my neuroqueer jumper, which is probably quite apt. And I'm joined in the box with another human being. I know. This is Dr. Annette Foster. If you could do a physical description.
And I'm a white person with long blondish hair and blue eyes and an oval face. And I have a green shirt on, which is one of my favorites, with a badge that Chloe has given me, which says they, them, which is
cool. Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, and I'm Katie Munday. I am also a white person. And I have actually cut my hair. Dun, dun, dun. It's taken me a couple of months. So I've got kind of messy, short hair, which is kind of dirty blonde. I've got large glasses that kind of go from kind of dark brown at the top to orange down the bottom. I'm wearing my usual bright green zip-up hoodie, which I have unzipped because I can't have it zipped up because it drives me mad. And I'm sitting in my usual corner spot on the sofa in front of, you know, someone's favourite green.
The curtains. They should just be called the curtains, I think.
Yeah. I don't think I should come on anymore. I think I should just stick Google eyes on there.
Yeah.
Glasses, just like that. Yeah.
Yeah, your glasses.
I'm more famous than I am.
People dancing. I'm assuming that was to the music.
Perfect.
Bobby. Like, we didn't hear it. I usually hear the music before we come on. And
actually didn't
dancing.
Hear it. Yes.
So evening, lovely people. And yes, today we are talking about, well, we're not. We're listening. We're hearing about Katie's Masters by Research. That's what MRes stands for. Findings on your master's project. What was the title? It was quite snazzy.
Stories from across the double rainbow.
Yes.
Trans and non-binary autistic narratives. Which I can get into the double rainbow in a minute as well, because you might think, what on earth does that mean? What does that mean? But I wanted it to sound nice. Yeah. Double rainbow is nice for me. So, I mean, I suppose I could start with that. Like, so the double rainbow is it's the idea of it representing the colours that are based on neurodiversity and also on like queer identities as well. So more broadly, it's neurodiversity and LGBTQIA+. But in this instance, I was talking obviously about trans and or non-binary and being autistic. So it was more a specific rainbow.
Well, I would like to ask.
Go for it.
That gave me joy, just the title. I like the double rainbow.
The title.
It's nice, yeah.
And we're not even doing this the way we'd normally do it, because we're like old hat, I think, at doing Aucademy sessions. So, because usually we do like, who are you? When did you discover you're autistic and stuff? But if you are interested, find any of the other videos that we've been in, and we would have probably discussed that. We're more interested in what Katie did in terms of their research. I would like to ask a very general question. Why did you bother to do this research at all?
Oh my goodness. So it's a simple question, but it's not a simple answer. Mm-hmm. It started with my undergraduate. So I did a Bachelor in Arts of Childhood and Youth Studies with Psychology. And I've been working with autistic and otherwise neurodivergent and disabled young people for maybe 10 years now. And it's only recently, in the last maybe 4 or 5, that a lot of the autistic young people I'm working with are very gender non-conforming, are very express themselves in the way that they want to, experiment with pronouns and with different names and nicknames, you know, and they're very much into the interests that they're interested in. Like, they don't care that they're you know, being brought up as a boy and have like the biggest, I don't know if they're LOL dolls or LOL dolls, but the tiny little exceedingly expensive but very cute little plastic dolls that you can get. They're just following their kind of own gender pathways and their own special interests and their own way that they want to express themselves. And I've always kind of been that way myself as well. And then working with kids is when I realized that, oh, I fit in here better than I've ever fitted in anywhere else in my entire life. So that's when I kind of realized I was autistic. So it was a thing for me to like explore what the young people might be going through that I work with. And then also was kind of uncovering my own kind of gender journey as well. So it's been I'm not keen on the word special interest, but it's been my kind of main interest for the last 3 or 4 years, which started off quite academically and then turned quite personal quite quickly. And I think, this is no surprise to anyone watching this at all, but there's been 80 years of autism research that is just absolutely horrendous, inaccurate, harmful, sexist, misogynistic, racist, homophobic, transphobic, everything else, that ableist most definitely, because it's been run and led by non-autistic people who, might have a cousin twice removed who's autistic, and therefore, some tenuous link to what they like to call autistic experience, even though it's not their experience at all. And then it's the same kind of thing in trans and gender studies in general. Like, it's just a load of cisgender people. It's really interesting. One of the participants spoke about how he felt like he used the word slime, slime that kids make. And it's kind of like a stretchy, pokey, proddy, solid but not solid, like oobleck, I think it also gets called as well. And that participant was talking about how we felt that trans people were kind of the slime that was taken out of the box. Everybody pokes the slime and then the slime goes back in the box. And I think that's very much what definitely autism research and trans research has been like. We'll talk to absolutely everybody around that trans person or around that autistic person, but God forbid we actually talk to the trans person or the autistic person themselves. It's very interested in what parents have got to say, which absolutely has its own merits, but after the 20th, 30th, 40th, 50th, 60th paper on that, might be worth actually talking to the trans kids themselves and what they've got to say about it, because they're actually living it. And obviously that's the same with kind of autistic stuff. And I think because trans autistic research, that very specific intersection, is relatively new, I know what I'm adding here is not groundbreaking, but what the participants have shared has been exceedingly interesting, and is they've come with so much knowledge and so much passion and so much of their personal experiences that they've shared with me and now with other people. I just wanted to make sure that there was as much trans autistic representation as a trans masked non-binary autistic person doing the research with trans non-binary autistic people, just to make sure that the start of that era of trans autistic research, if you will, at least gets off to a good start. Not that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I'm the Wen Lawsons, the Ian Perkises, the Rubes Walsh. I know Monique doesn't specifically do trans stuff, but they're non-binary and autistic. There's a lot of really brilliant trans or non-binary autistic people in research, or already very much doing this kind of work anyways. Maxfield Sparrow.
I think that's quite important because you're like, oh, I'm not doing groundbreaking work, but the point is we need lots of good, solid autistic and trans, or at least any gender non-conforming research done, because there's not been anything. Because when you started your PhD, do you want to talk just briefly about
I mean, I'm saying it's really interesting that you said in some ways it's so it's personal, and it almost you don't even know it at the start. you start your research, and I started my research looking into autistic women, and then realized, no, I need to include trans and non-binary. And then through the research, oh, I'm non-binary. So I think, that was back in 2015, 16.
I feel like, funnily, I'm just going to add one thing and then I'll let you carry on. I feel like Marianthi Corti did very similar stuff because they were of one mind in their gender, and then did quite similar work to you, actually, and then thought, hang on, I hope I'm not talking out of line here. I mean, it's a known fact that Marianthi is gender non-conforming, but I think that's part of her story as well, so it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think
their story,
and I did, and ultimately that was I guess a lot of times research, you research something that you're really interested in, and then realize, actually, I'm one of those people. And I was autistic. I'm autistic, and I think that we need so much more research by autistic people, by autistic trans people. We have to flood the research on autism in particular, on anything to do with that, so that our voices are heard, instead of kind of one voice against 500 that are not autistic or trans. I think that's really important. I can't remember what you asked me now, Chloe.
Oh, like why you did your research?
Oh, yeah.
Really anything in relation to like creative arts and being autistic and gender non-conforming?
Yeah, I mean, I felt it was really important to include people, and I hated the idea of people not being included, and that's why, I don't want to like talk about autistic women and then not include other people that need to have their voices heard. And so my research within the first year changed very quickly to obviously include everyone. And really, for me, it was about, having those voices heard, and, being true to the people that took the time, the participants that took the time to be a part of the research. Mine was a series of workshops. I also interviewed people about the workshops and about their experiences. But so it was more creative practices research stuff, but similar in that I really wanted to be true to what, because they're amazingly giving and kind of in talking about their experiences, and you just want to do the best you can to make sure that is respected.
And can we hammer that point home as well, which is that why is it important to do the work about autistic and gender non-conforming people? Because you said quite a bit, and I'm just thinking it's because the greater rates, like we're more likely to be gender non-conforming or, in some capacity part of the LGBTQIA community.
So quite a lot of the current research, as most things start off as, is prevalence rates. So, how many autistic people are, I'm using the word trans today, but I mean any sort of person who isn't cis. I'm adding everyone under that banner, which is perhaps a bit naughty of me, but when I talk about specific participants, I will absolutely use the words they use to talk about themselves. So any kind of gender divergent person might have I'm trying to say this in a word. I used the word characteristics earlier, but I really don't like that. But if they were to go get diagnosed, if they went into an autism diagnosis, yes, they probably would get diagnosed. And they'd tick a few boxes there. And as many autistic people come into especially gender identity healthcare and stuff like that, especially in the UK, that's been found in a few studies in the UK, across Europe. Some studies in Australia, a few in the USA. But what I will say about that, with all research, it's got to be taken with a pinch of salt. And I think there is a larger overlap between trans and autistic people than perhaps trans and non-autistic people. I think what worries me about the fixation on prevalence rates is the idea of it's like conflating the two pathologies. So there's like a pathology paradigm to most of that work. It's about, well, you know, trans and gender non-conforming, that's a bit odd. That's a bit weird, you know, and poking that slime, you know. And yeah, autistic people, they're yeah, that's a bit odd as well. And then kind of adding the oddities together. And I think there kind of is a place for prevalence work because you know, something is only a phenomenon if you notice it, and if you notice it because there is a prevalence there is big numbers of it, or noticeable numbers, or like interesting numbers, or like that's a bit peculiar, we'll look into that. But
I think interesting numbers, but we don't need to be referred to as like, because prevalence rates just sound, it does come from that very pathologizing way of looking at human beings, whereas I'm like, totally makes sense that we're more likely to be gender non-conforming because gender is a ridiculous social construct, like without talking about the prevalence, which is
and I think that's the problem with it. If the foundation of trans and autistic research is based on a pathology paradigm anyways, where both are seen as conditions, disorders, diseases, weirdness, whatever, or something that needs converting, or something that needs curing, then obviously that's problematic. And then if that's the foundation of your research, then what does all the research after that say? Worrying stuff. And then it gets into, you know, potential eugenics, conversion therapy, underlining kind of applied behavioral analysis, and it becomes a complete nightmare. So that's why I worry about prevalence rates. And I also worry about stuff like that because, so I'm going to keep using the word prevalence rates just because that's the wording that is used out there. But I mean the intersection of being both trans or non-binary and autistic. Maybe I'll switch to intersection. Let's go for that.
Yeah.
So they'll look at the number of people who are in this intersection, and then it's almost like problematizing that. And you know, if that is then used to, I mean, I know extreme male brain theory is old hat now. It was within autism research, but you know, it does kind of raise these kind of weird transphobic ideas around. Well, it makes sense that, you know, trans men exist in large numbers in the autistic community because all autistic people have extreme male brains that are unempathetic and everything like that. No, because non-binary people don't exist and trans women don't exist.
Exactly.
Like unicorns or something, I don't know. So that's like massively transphobic.
The thing is that
a race of non-binary people and trans women, and it's trans misogyny, and it's just like a whole just dumpster fire on its own.
The thing is, though, with those particular types of researchers and things, they don't even understand statistics themselves, because once you get to a certain stat, it just means it's normal. So like 1% of the population of anything is considered statistically normal. So if we're talking about 2% of the population likely is autistic, probably loads more, then it's normal. If you want to go with the terms normal, that
absolutely.
Like, what we mean is it's not abnormal. We won't have to use the word normal, but it's certainly not abnormal. And so, if we're starting to look at those intersections of being trans, gender non-conforming in some capacity, and they're getting above 1%, we're getting to a point of not abnormality.
Yeah, check your T numbers, girl. I don't do quant, but that's about as number specific as I'm going to get.
And I think more research from autistic researchers, from autistic, trans, or non-binary, or gender conforming researchers is the answer to that, because we're going to be looking at it from a different perspective. We're not going to be seeing it from that perspective. We're seeing it as, you know, celebrating that intersection and telling people stories, which is of great value.
So in terms of your research, what did you actually do?
So I spoke to 13 trans and or non-binary people. Some were trans men, some were trans mask non-binary like me, some were non-binary, and I think 2 or 3 used the term non-binary because that was better understood by most people than the term agender, which means that they're genderless. So I spoke to 8 on interviews we did on Zoom. We did those online. I was hoping to perhaps do stuff face to face, but obviously COVID had different ideas about that. Me being heavily pregnant also changed my ideas around that as well. There were a further 5 who did it through written communication because that was just a preference, or they had a bit more time to kind of mull over the questions or felt less pressured and kind of stuff like that. Also, there was 1 or 2 people I spoke to in Australia, so trying to sort out a Zoom meeting between the 2 of us was just a nightmare. So they ended up writing their answers instead. They all had the same questions or the same prompts, because there was actually only a few questions which were based on demographics, so age, where they live, ethnicity, that kind of thing. And the rest of it was kind of more conversational, like had 2 or 3 questions set up, but which were based around my research questions. And I had 3 of those, which was, the first one was to do with how trans and non-binary people, how we explain our intersecting identities and how we express them. The second one was to do with how narrative methodology could be used to share our stories. So narrative methodologies is just a really academic, tossy way of saying, telling our stories to somebody who's listening and then writes them down. And then the last one was to do with participants giving recommendations for future research. And they also gave me recommendations for my work as well, which I really enjoyed. And I think I really enjoy that about autistic people, is that we are not afraid to tell it how it is in most instances. And I think especially talking to other autistic people, because we are kind of culturally aware that if I'm not saying it, then don't infer that I'm saying that, because what the words I'm using is what I'm saying. You know, there's no context, there's no subterfuge, there's no double secret meaning to things. It's just the way I'm saying it. It's not personal. So that was really cool to be able to also get feedback on my current work whilst we're currently doing it. It was quite interesting. And then what I could do is use those ideas. Say that was the 3rd person I spoke to gave me an idea for something that was then something that I could try out with the next group of people that I was talking to, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's great. That's just helping you improve. So what was some of the feedback that you were given?
What, for me personally?
Yeah,
my work?
I'm interested. Yeah.
So the age old issue was something that somebody pointed out, despite them not knowing who I'd spoken to previously, for obvious reasons. This person was also based in research work as well, and we were having a discussion about a lot of research work being white centric, and obviously that's an issue, that's an age old issue across all research. And how would I make things more comfortable for Black, Indigenous, people of color to feel like they could talk to me if they wanted to about being trans and autistic? And well, although we didn't focus on that, obviously that was part of what people were talking about. It was more general lived experiences, but and how would I do that? And then it's me and this other white participant going, I really don't know. I'd really love to be able to make this as comfortable and accessible to as many people as possible. But so having spoken to 13 different people, we had a Chinese person, and we had a person who referred to themselves as dual heritage, mixed heritage, and the rest were white. So it's an age-old problem that I really don't have the answers to, and I don't know if the work that you two have done, have you found anything that's useful? I really should be asking Black, Indigenous people of colour this, really.
It is it's something that we're constantly trying. We even had the conversation today, didn't we, about how do we make it safe and suitable to be able to hear those intersectional voices, because we obviously want to, but at the same time we can't obviously force those people. So it's kind of like, and we shouldn't.
If you've got one person of color in your group and the rest of the group is white, how are they going to feel comfortable talking about that experience? And obviously you want more. I mean, I think we're doing our Autistic Discovery Journey program, hopefully in January. Yes, we're starting the kind of first run of it, and we're working in conjunction with London Autism Group Charity, which is amazing. And one of the suggestions was to include kind of a section on intersectionality in relation to race. We talk about gender quite a bit, and they're totally right, and that's something that we're working on now, and we're like, okay, how do we do this right?
Because we're white,
because we're both white.
So we're gonna reach out to our lovely Aucademy people and see if anyone is interested and willing just to support us to do that appropriately, because really all we want to do is actually hold space for Black people and people of colour who are in the group. So it's not us. It's not us going, this is how it is. It's more
creating a safe space and allowing them to have a discussion about it, and talk to that.
I mean, I was just about to say that. I mean, I didn't even. It's not it's not my place to talk for anyone. Of course, it's not, because I'm me and everybody else is them. But it's about raising voices, or with the immense amount of privilege I have with being white, and all three of us have with being white, and English speakers and various other things that we have. That's how do we raise voices in an appropriate way, which isn't just
I mean, I hope
tokenistic, or
because I've had this conversation with Melissa Simmons, who's fantastically honest, and I really appreciate that, because I'm like, what can I do? What can I not do? And a lot of what I try to do, based on some discussions I've had with different people, is in different settings, I guess, just show up and show as much as possible, Black people and people of colour, that we are potentially safe people for them if they decide that that's the case. But it's literally everything I do. If I'm training, I will always bring up the fact that I'm white privileged, and so while I might be disabled and impacted by ableism and discrimination and so on, that's not the same as Black people, trans people, etc., and trying to bring that up. And certainly that thing that I think a number of us know as academics, and not necessarily that all academics do it, but I think we hear, and I definitely have, I did it recently, was invited to do a talk, and I was like, okay, but have you got any Black autistic people attending this as well? Have you invited Black autistic people?
Where are the non-speaking autistic people as well? That's always my, or autistic people with learning disability, that's always my
So just trying to push that, and actually luckily that particular one, I was the token white person. It was fantastic.
Oh, cool.
I was like, this is great.
I
was like, okay, you've done a really good job.
But definitely something to talk about. So I think in relation to what you've written, and you have a lot of findings of different topics that kind of came up in discussion. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that and maybe give examples? Because I'm super keen.
Yeah, sure.
I think Annette is also a little bit jealous that you ended up with 5, because Annette ended up with like 77.
No. That was before I lowered it. I had 5 at the end.
You had like, that's for PhD, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're allowed to have 77. Go for it.
Yeah.
I did.
That was
I did my.
That was the codes, not the findings. Okay. No. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, there were 5 different. So, like I said before, like conversations were more kind of organic than I ask a question and you say, your 20 odd words about that, and then we move on to the next one. And it was, it was relatively chill. Hopefully, I was definitely chill, anyways. And there were 5 themes that just came up for basically across pretty much all of the conversations that I had with people. So basically, like, I don't want to go on about analysis too much because it's boring and who wants to hear about it. But after I'd had the conversations with people, I transcribed everything that was said between me and them. So I wrote it all down and then kind of compared what this person said to what this person said. And then all these different ideas came together. Well, this person spoke about, added on that subject as well. So the first theme, which is perhaps not surprising anybody, was about mental health and trauma. Now I put themes 1 to 5. It wasn't because mental health and trauma was the main thing that people spoke about, but I just had to put them in an order. And mental health is really important, so let's put it at the front. So I've got my actual thing in front of me, so I might even read you verbatim what some people said, because that's what it's all about. So a lot of the mental health was around it being exacerbated and it being made worse by long waiting lists for gender identity healthcare. So every name I'm going to use today is a pseudonym, is a totally made up name. So one of the participants, who I've called Derek, who's a trans man from the UK, had said that whilst going through any medical or therapeutic session as a diagnosed autistic person, sometimes it takes longer. I've read that and I've had people who are formally diagnosed say, yeah, that's correct. It's taken me longer to be able to access the correct healthcare and go through everything, that their processes take longer because they are neurodivergent. And this was, there's a few more people said pretty much exactly the same thing. Someone was going about someone who I called Scott, who's based in South Africa, said that, going into an overwhelming hospital with loads of people, getting really overstimulated and overwhelmed. So although he could get help in his gender affirming care, actually the places that he was going to were, although it was supportive in one manner because he was getting what he needed to affirm his gender and his gender expression, actually it was really, really difficult and impacted their mental and their sensorial health because they were just being completely and utterly bombarded and overwhelmed. Which, if you've ever been into a hospital, unfortunately, that is
environment. Horrible.
And someone.
Oh, it's just because we're doing research right now. Well, not right this very second, but earlier today we were in research, and that was one of the things that the young people, who are a lot of them, are
having to be very broad here. But
the talking about the environment and services, and not being able to even concentrate with the service because the environment was so distracting as an autistic person.
Sensory.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And so a lot of people were talking about actually putting their autistic diagnosis on hold to be able to first sort out their gender affirming care, because there are a lot more hoops. People from the USA said this, people in Australia said this, The person I spoke to in South Africa said this. I don't know if I've said the UK already, but people in the UK said that as well.
Hopefully they'll be back.
Katie?
I think their internet's gone.
Yeah.
That if you have a form, someone also said this about their ADHD diagnosis, that because they have a formal diagnosis of being neurodivergent, that they were spoken over, considered, childlike in their understanding of gender, completely infantilized, invalidated, but then no one said like, oh, okay, so I noticed that you're autistic. Is there a way that we can make things easier for you? Or are there things that we can accommodate for you? So they'll notice this person is autistic and the alarm bells will ring. But no one will do anything with this information.
Or ableist alarm bells.
Everyone's just going, oh my goodness, there's one of those autists in here, and they want the same things that everybody else does. Well, yeah, fucking boogaloo. Unfortunately that was across. So I spoke to 3-4 different people from the USA, and they were all in different states. So all different insurances, laws about gender affirming care. I mean, all sorts of different things. So even though they're all from the USA, obviously things are different everywhere. And they were very much saying the same issue about having to choose, do I get a formal diagnosis of being autistic, or do I go along my gender journey, because I know that whichever one I choose is going to affect how I'm cared for in the other setting, which is both ableist and transphobic, depending on, which side of that you're on.
I'm hoping, I'm not saying it's going to be loads better anytime soon, but I'm hoping in certain areas that is starting to change, because I've been sitting in on, it takes forever. This is the problem. Everything takes forever with like the NHS and systems that exist, but we've been sitting in on gender non-conforming meetings with the NHS and Grayson, who was part of the BU project. Because they've recognised that they're seeing greater numbers, and they've recognised that they're seeing greater numbers of neurodivergent people coming through their services, and actually recognising they're neurodivergent or lightly neurodivergent as well. And it's like, well, how do we support them,
these people? Yeah,
based on both of those intersectional identities.
Yeah, and having absolutely torn down autism and gender research at the beginning, there are people like John F. Strang, who's based in the USA. I think he's out in California, who, he's never said this out loud, I don't think, but is a cisgender non-autistic practitioner. He works with gender divergent young people in a gender identity healthcare clinic. I think he even owns one out there, but he's quite high up in this clinic. And he's realized that about the young people that he's seeing, that, oh, hello, there's something going on here. And instead of the ableist alarm bells ringing, him and his team are starting to create guidelines around how to support these young people. And it's not just from the practitioner's point of view, but from the young people themselves. Okay, what were your experiences? What would have made things easier? Like, what would you change next time? How does this feel? All of this kind of thing. So the work does exist by cis people who are non-autistic, that are true allies. I would absolutely say that Diane Ehrensaft, who I also believe is based in California, and she works with gender divergent young people, and again has found that a lot of the people that she's working with are also not just autistic, but neurodivergent as well. She's written some papers on what she calls double rainbow helix kids. So very much with a take on double rainbow again, and about how care is different, but a lot of the supports at home are quite similar, for kind of exploring gender and kind of being gender affirmative and stuff like that at home are quite similar. So this work does exist. It's just unfortunately at this moment in time few and far between, because people are still caught up in, oh, this is interesting, how many people like this are out there, and then we're not going to do anything with that information.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we're not going to help to support them or make it easier for them.
Yeah. No. So I dread to imagine the amount of autistic and neurodivergent kids, and just kids in general, who, sorry, excuse me, who, you know, with the changes that are going on with the gender identity development services across the UK at the moment, and people have been on waiting lists for like 3-4 years now. You know, I had a friend of mine who, he's non-autistic, he's a trans man, and he aged out of child services, went over to adult services for the gender identity healthcare, and, you know, he's a, I hate the word resilient, but, you know, he's got himself together, you know, and he kind of coped with it okay, but I know that not everybody has that kind of sticking power or the resources or the ability to. And you know, if you're based in Wales and you've got to go all the way into like central London to go to the Tavistock clinic, then, you know, your adults that you live with have to be able to take you there to afford the time off work or whatever it is they do in the daytime. They have to be able to afford to take you there. You know, and that's really, really daunting stuff for, you know, neurodivergent and disabled families that also don't have a lot of money. Like, there's a lot of us that really don't have much money or resources or, you know, and things take a lot more emotional and executive energy for us than most folk, I would say.
Yeah, just traveling to London and as well, you know, that kind
literally of... like, yeah, so it must be completely and utterly daunting to people when things have just been thrown into complete disarray, and you've already been on waiting lists for years and years and nobody tells you what's going on. Yeah, and then you have to go through everything all over again when you go into adult services.
Yeah.
And it's not like, you know, if you're on the waiting list for 3 years on children's services and then you go out to adult services, that doesn't mean you've been waiting on the waiting list for 3 years. It starts all over again. So you could be waiting until you're like 21 until, you know, someone sees you. And that's for your first appointment. That's to decide whether you even need help or not. That's not like, oh, yeah, brilliant, and we're going to do, you know, I wanted HRT or I wanted puberty blockers or I need this and I need that. It's this is your doctor who's probably going to be with you for the next 5 years because that's how long anything's going to take. Yeah. Sorry, what's Tanya added?
I just wanted to flag, because Tanya's point is quite important as well, that adults that you live with have to, or anyone adult around you, I guess, has to be willing and supportive to take you as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, and you know, and that's another issue. You know, and so the there was, oh my goodness, what year are we in? So last year there was it was brought in, then it was repealed, that young people had to go before the courts if they were under the age of 16 to get permission to go on puberty blockers. So they would first of all need it from their parents, because otherwise how are you getting into the court system and everything else? Sorry, parents or adults that they're living with. Then they would need that from their GP, and they would need a referral for that, and then they would need it from the court system. Just to go to the first session that may not turn into anything anyways. And that was also to do with being able to show mental capacity for taking puberty blockers, which by the age of 16, if you are a, you know, if you're a bit of a puberty machine, then a lot of stuff has happened by the age of 16. Like, you know,
it must be really traumatizing for people, you know, that they're not in the body, they're not their body's changing without, in not the way that they expected or wanted or deserve. Can I ask, are we aware of any groups or anything in the interim for people? Because I'm conscious that people might watch this and be at that stage where they're waiting to get even the first appointment. Is there?
I know that the Tavistock Clinic run gender divergent youth groups. I have a feeling that the other, are there 9 across the UK? I think there's 9 gender identity clinics in the UK. There's 2 or 3 up in Scotland, and the rest are in England. Do youth groups that you can go along to and be with other gender divergent young people. I know that the one in Tavistock is also run by LGBTQ people as well. So like the youth practitioners there are all LGBTQ, even if they're not trans, they're, so that's great role modeling as well. And then there's another affirmation and validation and kind of stuff like that, and would be, in my eyes, a lot more comfortable than going there with, another cisgender kind of youth group. Mermaids are fantastic. They're based in Brighton.
Mermaids.
Sorry. Beyond Reflections, do they do adults?
I'm also just going to ask the Aucademy elves, can you grab a link for mermaids?
Yes.
For us. I'm also just flagging.
BU.
Yeah, I'm just flagging for people. It is Kent based, but the BU project, which is actually run out of the Porchlight Homeless Charity for some reason, but it's specifically for gender non-conforming young people, but they also recognise and know that they have got lots of neurodivergent people. Thank you, Aucademy Elves. So that was the BU project. We've also got here mermaidsuk.org.uk.
Yeah. I'm just gonna I'll share it anyways. I don't know if it definitely does adults, but I don't know if it does young people as well. Beyond Reflections, which is a trans-based charity in Southampton. Sorry, it's a Southampton-based trans charity. And everyone who is involved in that on all levels, they're all trans. They're volunteers, trans, non-binary, agender. They're all non-cis, which is really, really brilliant. And actually, oddly enough, hoping to do some work with them next year on cancer research related stuff as well. But that's something else. I'm trying. I'm a patron of AP Cymru, which is an autistic-led autistic charity, obviously in Wales. And Karen, who runs that, I've been in conversations with her for a couple of months now about starting trans autistic online Zoom groups for their young people, and also to do kind of kind of wraparound type stuff. So it's I think it's already when you have children and you find out they're autistic, and being autistic in itself is not an issue. Obviously, we know that. Some people might have different views of that. For me, it's not an issue. However, when you're fed, oh, they're not going to do this, they're never going to do this, they're never going to amount to anything, they're going to have to be supported their whole lives, and they're going to have to, not that there's an issue with any of that, but people worry about that. And I think when you add trans on top of something that they are already really massively overwhelmed about by all the information that they're constantly being told that their child's not going to amount to anything, they're not going to enjoy anything, then all these other ideas around autistic young people, I think it's a really worrying experience, because these parents may or adults, caregivers might not have known anything about autistic experience apart from the hideous stuff that they've been told by everyone. And actually, even when you Google search things, it's still hideous information you're getting out there, and inaccurate and harmful. And quite frankly, it's the same for kind of it can be the same for trans and non-binary identities as well. And and lack of resources and time and energy and everything else, especially if parents are also neurodivergent or don't realize that they're neurodivergent. It's a very complex beast. So I think working with just the young people is fantastic, but I think if we can get, and like Tanya was saying, like some parents are just really, really anti. That's not going to be, I'm estranged from one of my parents. Like, it happens across all sorts of different people, and all sorts of different ages. So, it's taking the element of fear out for parents. So I think that's going to be a lot of what we work on as well. So I'm working on stuff.
Yeah.
Trying to save all the trans autistic people, please.
And I just want to flag a few things, actually. And sadly, it's a really long link, but basically on the Aucademy.co.uk website, if you just search for...
we need to make it shorter.
Yeah, but then it'll break the link.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, it's an LGBTQIA plus resource list. I think that's actually the title of the list itself, but it's much longer in the URL for some reason. But there's a list, it's growing. Katie's been curating, and anything we find gets added there. I just wanted to flag as well, which I sadly know about, because we know from Lyric Homans, who was based in Texas. They left because of the issue with how trans people are treated. So Suzanne says, living nightmare for trans individuals, families, and even allies here in Texas. Those who can are leaving or researching how best to do so. And I just wanted to flag that you have, this is JSIC, isn't it? This is JSIC.
Yeah.
Feathers, or is it Wade? I'm going to go with JSIC.
Well, there's a Facebook group as well.
Yeah. But they've got a few peer groups and things that they run as well, and coaching. So if you're in the States, so that's queercult.org, if you need support or to learn or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic person as well. I had a point about Texas. Did I have a point about Texas? The kind of I think Greg Abbott's in Texas. If I'm honest with you, the whole of America, the USA, just kind of blurs into one for me. Greg Abbott was saying about one of this. He's not a senator; he's a governor. Was saying about how anyone who is seen to in any way support transgender youth in their gender journey in any way whatsoever, that's tantamount to trigger warning. It's tantamount to child abuse, and they will be prosecuted with that. If you are a school teacher, youth worker, support worker, and you're found to be, first of all, they'd have to find this out. But if you're found to be gender affirming in any way, in that kind of, even lawyers, stuff like that, you'll get your, your affiliations revoked, your qualifications revoked. If you're found doing it as a teacher, you're struck from being able to teach ever again. It's a criminal record, it's a criminal offence. And it's also the same for, families, caregivers. So if you're found to be helping your child's mental health through gender affirming care, or just anything that you do at home with them, it's a criminal offence. You can have your children taken off you. And then if you overlace that with Black, definitely Indigenous, people of colour, who obviously have a massive history in the USA of having their children taken off them. Texas is a dumpster fire, mate. Literally, it's horrendous. It's really, really horrifying. And I'm glad that Lyric's not there anymore, and I'm hoping that whoever needs to get the hell out of there can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Tanya's just saying, currently arguing the exact opposite of basically what you just described is happening in places like Texas. So they're arguing the opposite, which is not supporting and validating a young person's gender discovery journey is child abuse, in my opinion, is what you're saying. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, couldn't agree
Shall
more
we get
with that.
back to your...
Remember, the States is very big, and it's very, not all the states are like Texas.
I've just seen.
I mean, I'm from Seattle, and it's a very democratic state. It's a very liberal state.
I've just seen from
different
Bobby as well, who's originally from the States, just saying Texas equals very bad, New York City
equals very good. Yeah, and I know that California is very liberal as well. I appreciate that. Sorry, I'm not trying to. I meant geographically speaking. If someone said to me, "Oh, Missouri," I'd be like, "Yeah, that's brilliant. Where the hell is that?"
Yeah.
That's what I meant. I didn't mean politically and culturally and stuff like that. I just meant it's very. I know that Texas is south. I know.
That's like me, even with the UK where I live, I'm just like, if it's not in Kent, it's basically north. That's how I view the UK.
Yes. If it's north of London, I don't know. I'm sorry, everybody. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. Any other lovely key things that you want or difficult?
Oh my goodness, yeah. We're almost talking about the first one. And we're an hour in. Horrifying. Right, here we go. So the second one was about relationships and socializing. And I think what I love the most about this is that there was a lot of talk about like communal living. And some of that was kind of on a polyamorous basis. So you might be a polycule, so there might be romantic or sexual connections between more than just a couple. There might be like 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever. With perhaps different like dynamics within that group, but you're all kind of romantically or sexually kind of connected. So that was, and also like talks about queer platonic relationships as well. So some of the people I spoke to were asexual, which again is more common across autistic people than it is across non-autistic people. So they were talking about, this particular participant was talking about how they actually find romantic relationships highly stressful because they feel in very big ways. So the love is high and that endorphins and the euphoria and all of that is really rich and beautiful and but also like exceedingly overwhelming, but also they didn't use these words, but like the rejection sensitive dysphoria and breakdown in communication, like that can be also exceedingly intense for this particular person. And they did talk about the irony of finding one romantic relationship difficult enough or one kind of stable relationship difficult enough, but also wanting to be polyamorous as well. They said, I have no idea how I do. I think they said something like, I think my brain would explode or something like that. It was interesting because that person also spoke about warm bath people, which is a very old reference. I think it was Parsons in the 1950s. And it was about the idea of having a family. It was very patriarchy based and heterosexual based. Obviously, it was the 50s. So it was about a man being able to come home from work and be able to sink into his family and his home like he was sinking into a warm bath. But it's interesting that they also used, although they were not heterosexual, and they're polyamorous, they were talking about having a home and a loving relationships that were also based on this kind of warm bath idea. So yeah, and they were talking about how I'll just say it instead of I'll just say it how they've said it. And I think just feeling okay with not having a typical family structure is something I really want to work towards, because I'm constantly having to accept that I don't meet societal standards in basically all the way possibles. I could not meet them. I don't meet them, chuckles. And I still struggle with that. So I think for me, it's about accepting that this is how my family structure looks, because like my friends are the center of my relational world in a lot of ways. And like my family don't necessarily get that or recognize it or understand that. So yeah, I think just leaning into that and being okay with that for myself. Yeah, outside recognition is an issue for me though. So it's really interesting that they were struggling with their blood relatives, making sense or validating or understanding their queer platonic relationships. So that was really, really interesting. That was echoed by another participant as well, actually.
We've had two discussions here about from two polyamorous people.
Yes.
So Grace, and being poly and negotiating all the feelings. People think it's easy, and it really blooming isn't.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think Grayson's also had this sort of discussion as well, because then you've got Tanya. So you've got the feelings. Okay, the feelings part is going to be difficult potentially. And Tanya saying, I actually find that poly takes off a lot of the pressure and overwhelm because of the need for direct communication and the space that comes with the territory. It's not easy, but monogamous relationships make zero sense to me. And I think that's quite interesting as well, because that takes into account autistic communication differences, and that lots of us need clear, direct communication and boundaries to understand the relationship. So I think, I mean, I'm not a polyamorous person. I don't know enough about it at all, but from people I've talked to and friends, there's structure and
a lot of structure. There has to be.
Yeah.
For it to work.
Yeah. And I think maybe autistic people, that might suit them.
Boundaries.
Because of the boundaries that have to be clear, and the communication having to be clear and things. Interesting.
Yeah. And I think you just get, again, I'm in a monogamous relationship, but I think you just get different things from different people. And you do that even if you're in a monogamous relationship. I go to Jay about everything, but also there are things that I talk to my mum friends about, or my work friends about, or, you just get different things from different people. And I think there must be something nice about that, to come home to 10 sets of loving arms, if you will, as opposed to one. Like I can, it's not my lifestyle, but I can completely appreciate that. But also the mega amount of work that must go into it. And
there's me. I'm just like, I'm okay with the cat.
I mean, I think, it's weird, because I always crave communal living, and I've done it a few times. But navigating social situations with more than a couple of people is just too overwhelming for me. So even though I might feel, oh, maybe I might be poly, but I don't know if I could actually do it, just due to overwhelm in relation to social situations. Yeah.
Not in practice.
Yeah.
Poly in theory, there's me living in the woods by myself.
Yeah, that's it.
With a cat.
Yeah. I also think, like, oh my goodness, how do you decide what to have for dinner? Like, this conversation between me and Jay is like every day, what are we having for dinner?
But to be fair, is that not just a neurodivergent household anyway? Like, if Annette's round, if I've got more than just Annette here, which is fine. Yeah. But you've got to consider, like, if Louis, there's certain things Louis can't eat. Like, they won't eat black pepper. They won't eat
spice.
Yeah, anything spicy, or black pepper spicy.
Vegetables.
Olives, they call Satan's clag nuts. I'm so sorry, everyone who now thinks that about olives. Don't Google it. And then Annette is gluten, wheat, and dairy intolerant. But it's fine. It's just what you do. You're just like, okay, that's your dish and that's your dish. So I just assume that's just what happens anyway in neurodivergent households.
No, we just not argue about it, because we don't argue about anything. But it's just like, and then because I'm sure Jay's sitting here. I'm sure he won't mind me telling you this, because Jay's got ME. He has a lot of brain fog. I'm ADHD. I have a lot of brain fog. So even when, like, tonight, when we were like, yes, we finally decided what it is we're having, on the basis that I need to eat before I come on here to you guys, otherwise I will be raging. So it needed to be between putting little man to sleep and me coming on here and something that we both actually wanted to eat and Jacob be asked to cook. Right. And then so we decided earlier in the day, this is what we're going to do. And then both of us have both gone there at lunchtime and gone, what do you want to have for dinner? We had the exact same conversation over again. How do you have that with like 7-8 people? It would just try. It would, yeah. We've totally gone off topic, but I could just.
We have very, go-tos. We very rarely do exciting new things because that's what restaurants are for. And then you go to the restaurant and have the same thing you have all the time. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. Yes. So findings number 3, aspirations.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing to communal living, if I may, because Sam, who was an agender person who's living in the UK, just want to make sure I get they them pronouns perfect. I would like, they said, I would like a commune for all my sick, queer and disabled friends. My friends are all over the country and all over the world, are dealing with very similar issues to me, whether it's healthcare issues or funding or living space or care and work and stuff like that. It just feels and sounds better if we can all just move in together and help each other doing the things that someone else can't do, but you can.
It's utopia. That's what we're talking about all the time. We just need to take over, like, I never remember if it's Greenland or Iceland. Which one's the green one? It's Iceland, isn't it? Iceland is green and Greenland is icy. Okay. Yeah. So we would take over Iceland and move away from all the neurotypical people and just be queer and neurodivergent, and it'd be great.
Would. And then what was I've totally lost myself here.
Sorry.
Oh, no. I've lost myself in my Word document, not in like,
okay. I just want to flag the screen then. So we've got from Victoria saying that they struggle with which mug to use for my tea. Life is too complicated. I like Tanya's suggestion. Tanya does have children, so, these are good suggestions from somebody who's done them. Get a fridge whiteboard, list your same food meals on it, and don't open the fridge and get overwhelmed. I like that. Look at although then I would be like, open the fridge and I don't have all the things for the same food that I have them. Sure.
Yes. it is real. The struggle is real. Just eat Pop-Tarts forever.
Well, I have a partner who actually doesn't recognize when they're hungry. So sometimes we have arguments about whether I will want to make dinner, and they adamantly don't want dinner to be made because they're not hungry. And but I'm hungry. And then I end up making the food and they go, that smells kind of nice. I think I might have some now, after we've had a major argument about whether I can cook dinner or not.
What's food? Why is it always food?
Yeah.
So the third theme we got was about aspirations. And then also kind of like organically people were talking about like access issues to their kind of aspirations and dreams as well. And I wanted, aspirations was actually one of the questions that I had set out because, autistic research and trans research is very much doom and gloom, content warning for what I'm just about to talk about. Like it's always about, trigger warning. I keep saying content warning, trigger warning. So, it's all about suicide rates and mental health disorders, differences, homelessness, STIs, AIDS, whatever. It's always very focuses on the very dark or negative connotations of being autistic or being trans or both, which absolutely, like, we should look at that. Of course we should do, because if we don't know those struggles, we can't do anything about it. And like I say all the time, being autistic isn't like rainbows and unicorn farts and glitter. Like there's some real deep stuff that a lot of us are carting around with us all the time. but also like we enjoy stuff too. Like we have a lot of fun, and trans autistic people do as well, and we have dreams and we have aspirations and we have plans. Not all of us, but like some of us do, definitely. So so I wanted to specifically like look at that and appreciate that we're not just, you know, again, like problematized people. And they had all sorts of different ideas, talking about kind of chosen family and creating their chosen family, which may or may not include kind of adopted or biological children. Some of them were talking about going further with their medical transition, to do with kind of top surgery, hormone replacement therapy. And some of them were talking about finding more suitable work, which I actually talk about more in the fourth theme, because that's employment anyways. And, you know, unsurprisingly, like a few of these have obstacles to them. So like when we're talking about the inaccessibility of gender identity healthcare, like obviously that's going to get in the way of puberty blockers, of hormone replacement therapy, of even getting involved in talking therapies that are trans affirming, let alone anything kind of operation based. And lack of support from kind of medical professionals, and absence of work accommodations, which, you know, I think we're all pretty much versed on anyways. So some of them were talking about having children. Yeah, I'd like to do this verbatim as well. Again, this was from Derek, who is a trans man in the UK. He uses he, him, just checking pronouns. I'd quite like to have kids. It's something that I had to really think about before medically transitioning, due to the fertility issues that come along with testosterone. Personally, I don't want biological kids. I don't have an interest of using what I have to create life. It's just not something I'm interested in, and it never really has been. So that was really interesting. And I think what's interesting about that is that the research and the information on your fertility rates after you start HRT, whether that's estrogen or whether that's testosterone, yeah, there's not an amazing amount of empirical data around that. So people might have started HRT, and then, you know, it could be a couple of years down the line that they think, actually, you know, I do want biological children, but the effects of their HRT means that they are no longer able to produce biological children. Yeah, a couple of people spoke about that, and about being stuck with the almost impossible decision of, again, we were talking about the impossible decision of, do I go for my autistic diagnosis, or do I do my trans affirming care? And then you come into the trans affirming care, and then you have to make the decision of, do I carry on with my trans affirming care, or do I take a break in order to recoup my fertility and to have a family in a more typical manner? So even when things are going in the right direction, there's still a lot of really big, tough decisions that people have to make. And then obviously, if you're in the USA, insurance has to be able to cover that, and that's a whole other, you know, thing to worry about.
I just wanted to comment actually to the, like you say, that decision that people might be having to try and make between, not the children part. I don't think I could speak to that. That wouldn't really be appropriate. But I think it's quite interesting that there are people that are weighing up, do I go for my gender confirming sort of route first over my autistic? I mean, really what we're saying is the medical model confirming that you're an autistic person. And I guess as I'm not a trans person, so I'm obviously not speaking for trans people, but I would think go for the trans affirming part, because you're not going to get much necessarily from the autistic diagnosis.
From an official diagnosis. I think you get loads from discovering that you're autistic, and from the community, and being part of an autistic community, and learning about your own personal profile and how you can, adapt your challenges.
I guess that's an outsider looking in a trans person's journey and just thinking, that might be quite an important one to start.
And I think also that sometimes that decision isn't the person's to make. If they've got an autism diagnosis when they were 6, because that's what the adults in their life wanted, then, and now all of a sudden it's in a problem for gender identity healthcare. That's not me shaming parents, by the way. Like, of course, you need answers and you need to support your child. So absolutely, if that's what you need to do, you need to do it. But the unforeseen kind of issues that creates and it shouldn't create, but it does create for gender identity, gender affirming autistic people is massive, and I think I was going to say this for all 3 of us, but I'm not going to do that, but I'll definitely say it for me. I am a very confident person, and I kind of always have been. I've been through a lot of traumatic shit, but I've always loved myself. If that doesn't sound really strange, like I've always had a lot of respect for myself and a lot of love for myself, and I'm very much, you take me as I come, or you do not take me at all. There's not really an awful lot of compromise there. So for me, although I am privileged enough, I do have a formal diagnosis of being autistic. I think it would be easy for me to say that you don't get that much from an autism diagnosis. No. Because for me, I didn't really, because although I did get some really super help from the university for various things, my way that I see myself or understand myself hasn't really changed that much. But I know that there are people who have been, who are twice my age, who have been really, really struggling for years for various different reasons, and thinking, oh God, it's me, there's something wrong with me. People keep calling me lazy, they keep calling me this, and then they get this formal diagnosis of someone going, it's not your fault, this is what you're just wired differently to other people. And that could be like,
it's interesting because you can obviously feel the same way about your gender and your sexuality. Ooh. Is that if you don't have the knowledge and the words and things like that, like I learned so much as being around students at university that I was just like, wait, I'm not broken, because they were using words and I'm like, that's a thing. And oh, okay, that's amazing. I just want to flag, because we got some really interesting, lovely comments.
Oh, please,
So there's a few, there's some that are kind of connected, so I'm going to jump back and forth. So Grayson, who, like I say, started all the fantastic work that BU do at Porchlight Charity, and is trans man, and they're just saying, with waiting as many years as you have to in order to access the care you need, I would get on the trans stuff first because it takes longer. So that's their take on this, and I think that it's very useful, because Grayson has met lots of gender non-conforming people in the work that they do, so that's really helpful. I want to flag, so we have some really lovely comments from an Orchid 805 over on YouTube, and this is really important and interesting as well. So there's just explaining that medical transition isn't right for everyone and can harm. So distinguishing those who MT, I'm not sure what that means, I'm afraid.
Medically transition.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Distinguishing those who medically transition would help or harm is no easy task. And then they explain, my struggle with identity has taught me that transition first begins in the mind, and that medical transition isn't necessarily needed. However, maturity and perspective is.
Yes. Oh, sorry, they're still talking. Okay, no, go for it. Finish what they have to say.
Really lovely, really interesting, and we've not seen Orchid before, so I'm quite conscious.
Please,
to So they're just saying being autistic and trans is to be other, in quotation marks, existing between the social genders or outside of them. I would like to see a third gender or interim other space that society recognises. And they just want to say that it's okay to be other and okay to embrace being trans without medical augmentation. And I think that's important too. So
yeah,
all
totally
the ways of being
trans,
you know, and I flagged it at the start. We are really appreciating our trans people in this week because it's Trans Awareness Week. Are we aware of the trans people in quotation marks? That's a joke that we can't tell because you know, autistic people aren't funny. But we're appreciating our trans people. We're going above awareness. We're going to appreciation and celebration, and however shape you know, color, flavor,
whatever, your experience,
So I just want to clarify a few things just in case I haven't been that obvious in where I stand with things. And I wrote about this in my dissertation as well, which I don't know if you've actually shared a link to yet. That would possibly...
I can share it again.
Be quite useful. So I did speak about the fact that, like Orchid was saying, you know, again, I'm going to bash on prevalence rates again. Prevalence rate stuff is that it focuses on trans-binary people for the most part because they tend to be the people who go in for gender affirming care, which kind of erases non-binary, agender, people who socially transition, people who are in the closet, all sorts of different people who it's really unsafe to be authentic in their transness and their gender expression. And I think the issue with the prevalence rates works is that it focuses on a trans medicalist idea that you are only trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming if you have X, Y, Z surgeries, or if you're not on hormones, then you're not trans. And this is where this idea comes, and this adds to the confusion for everybody because everybody feels like they're not queer enough, they're not trans enough, or like it's why it took me so long to get to my trans masculine kind of identity because and this mixes in with being autistic as well because I wear a lot of linen dresses, like a lot of linen dresses. If you look in my wardrobe, I'm like, you know, Minnie Mouse. I have the same outfit and most of it's linen dresses because I cannot stand trousers on my ankles. I absolutely detest socks. I get to a certain point in the day where socks just hurt my feet and my ankles or make my feet really itchy. And I'm hot all the time, all year round, doesn't matter where I am. So when you said Autopia was in Greenland, I was like, yes, please. I would actually feel cool for once in my life. So I am not what would possibly be definitely the stereotyped idea of what transmasculine is. Like where I am at the moment, I don't want to start testosterone. I absolutely do not want to have facial hair. That's not for me. I don't even like the hair that's on my head, if I'm honest with you. I'm a bit like you, Chloe. You know, if I could just have it cut like this and it just stay like this forever, that would be amazing. You know, there's I don't want to have top surgery at the moment. I probably never will. There's just it's not for me. And that's not saying that people who do go in for that's a problem, because of course it's not, because it's individual, because trans people aren't all one person with one experience. So yeah, I just want to make that very clear. Like, you do not have to be going in for any kind of gender affirming healthcare for you to be trans at all. Like, I just want to make that exceedingly clear. And also, when I talk about gender identity healthcare as well, is that some people go into there, and because it is very rigorous, and I understand why it is, because these are big decisions. These are massive decisions that people are making when mental health is already high for various different reasons, including gender dysphoria. So some people just go into gender identity healthcare and have talking therapy and think, oh, you know, actually, perhaps I am cis, or perhaps I'm not cisgender, but actually I'm okay in my body at the moment, or, you know, it's unraveling other stuff, trauma, various other things that definitely autistic people experience. So yeah, when I'm talking about gender identity healthcare, I don't mean it has to be hormones, or it has to be this, or it has to be that. It's just,
and that's why it's so important to see different people. This is, you know, it's like the whole thing of, well, you don't look autistic, and it's like, yeah, because you need to see the diversity of the autistic community. You need to see the diversity of what it means to be trans. You know, we've had, you know, beautiful Nick Walker, trans woman, who describes themselves at the start as a relatively sort of, I can't remember the exact terminology.
Was it a young Robert De Niro?
I'm not sure. You know, and they're queering what it means to be a trans woman, because the whole point is keep subverting the expectations of anyone, of anything, ever, for the good, obviously.
What's his name? Who's part of Neuroclastic? Oh, Jude.
We all stare blankly.
I don't know.
Yeah, sorry.
But anyways,
Jude, who's involved in Neuroclastic, whose second name I cannot remember, is a trans man, and you know, is not what would be a stereotype of, you know, masculine, you know, something like that. And they talk about that a lot. That's the only reason I brought that up, because that's another person that I think of. Haha, you know, and we show up in our authenticity in different ways. And I talk about neuroqueer quite a lot in my dissertation as well, because obviously we love Nick Walker. So I think it's interesting to put, I was talking about moving away from the pathology paradigm. So the idea that autistic people and trans people are diseased, ill, whatever, and moving towards a neurodiversity paradigm where we are understood as whole people with strengths, weaknesses, aspirations, loves, hates, whatever, but also appreciating that some of us, well, I would say most of us, need some support of some kind. But I think that neuroqueer theory can absolutely be put in autistic people's experiences of being trans, because the least, like, it's even when we're trans, we're not conforming.
Yeah, definitely.
And I really love that. Like, I like
that, because I think Nick has been one of such an influential sessions. We've had her on a number of times for so many people, including myself. Just like, I'm neuroqueering by shaving my head. That's amazing, you know, because
literally listen to her forever.
Yeah,
totally.
We've got Grayson saying, you know, felt that so much, Katie, not being enough, like mental health, trans, queer, you know, not enough of those things.
Me too. You know, for me, just meeting all the amazing autistic, trans, LGBTQ people within the community has made me, you know, discover things about myself, and made it okay for me to be non-binary, to be autigender. You know, that, you know, for me, being autistic affects my gender so much, and it's so much a part of me. But I mean, both of the things are, and I like myself the way I am, and that's okay. You know, I on the other hand can't have to have long hair, because short hair is too much work for me. So you know, it's all those things that kind of, you know, because of the sensory aspect of being autistic, that affects so many other things about how we see the world and how we experience the world. And
so this idea of queering queer, like queering being how to be queer as well, you know, and back to Nick Walker, you know, because I'm flagging this because Victoria's, I know, found Nick's stuff also really helpful. So Victoria's saying here, I didn't have the language to describe my gender identity growing up. There was nothing that fitted. I just felt lost and kept silent so many lost years. And that is obviously a sad comment. But I also know that Victoria found Nick's idea of just queering how to even be autistic was helpful for Victoria, because Victoria was like, but I'm not like that autistic person or that autistic person or that. And Nick's like, no, queer that as well. Don't be like anyone's expectation of what it means to be autistic. We had some love for you, Annette. Here's some love. Love all the queer people, everyone. You're all like, just have like a little love love for everyone. I don't know where we've gone with that.
But I think also just the whole idea of the stereotype and the medical model of what autistic people are is an autistic person in distress. It's not an autistic person. And I think that's really, and like you said as well, showing aspiration, showing that we're people that are with challenges and strengths, and that we need support. But that doesn't mean that, we're in distress our whole lives, especially if we are part of an autistic community and have some kind of, pride in our identity.
Yeah. And that's another issue with like taking a trans medicalist view. It continues on the idea of like, well, if you're trans, you have to be gender dysphoric. Like, you have to hate your body, and you must struggle with this, and and all this kind of thing, which adds to, obviously what Grayson said about not feeling enough. And I think there's also issues around kind of toxic positivity with stuff like that as well. Like, someone's got it, you've got it so much better than everybody else, or people have always got it worse than you, and I feel like, I mean, this is anecdotal more than anything else, but I feel like pretty much all autistic people I know are much better at looking after each other and being kinder to other people than we are with ourselves. I think that's why so many of us work in social care, youth stuff, teachers, lecturers, like, because we're seem to be better at looking after other people than ourselves.
I had a really frustrating young Met Police personnel try to argue with me in training that that surely, though, because I was trying to explain there's no such thing as disorder. We're talking about trauma responses. We're talking about, and the majority of the people in the room got it. I was really nervous to do it because I was like, I'm going to go in and tell them all that mental illness doesn't exist, but that trauma responses and acquired neurodivergence does. And actually they already know that, like, because they're the Met Police, they deal with lots of things. They have a PTSD helpline for staff and things like this because of the things that they have to do and see and stuff. But there's this one person, and I still argue with him, and this was 2019, and I still argue with him in my head, but everyone basically booed him in the end because they were like, we're listening to this person who we paid to come. Anyway, he was still trying to argue that, but gender dysphoria is a disorder because blah, blah, blah. And I could not argue back because it was just such a ridiculous comment. And then Jessica, who was with me later, was like, but that's like saying you have bullying disorder because you've been bullied. Like,
yeah.
And I'm bringing this also up because I wanted to flag Moat's Place the Page, which is really, I don't know what that is, but it's very stimmy as a phrase, because they've explained, it's not the trans part that makes people suicidal, for instance. It's the discrimination. They've said obviously, but it wasn't obvious to this Met Police person. So it's the discrimination for those people who don't understand that you're feeling like you're in the wrong body, or you're feeling like, no, I'm trans and I need you to understand that, your dysphoria may be coming from a place of others doing it to you.
And that intersectionality of being autistic and trans and having that experience as an autistic person as well, that, you're not upset because you're autistic. It's the way that you're treated within society.
And I think even when you are affirmed, let's say you have like a really gender and neurodiversity affirming family, and even in the school that you go to, they are as well. Like, it, you don't, even those who are privileged enough to have that, and it is a privilege, you don't have to throw a stone very hard before you hit transphobia and before you hit autistic-phobia and ableism. Like, it's out there, it's prolific, it's everywhere, and it's so everywhere that people don't even bat an eyelid to it. So I was explaining, I don't know why it came up. It's really random, but someone was talking to me about the Big Bang Theory the other day, and the American sitcom. And I was just saying, man, like, I can't watch that. I just can't, because it's so, I mean, like, anti-Semitic, racist, fat-phobic, misogynistic. I mean, every phobia and ism you can think of.
And I literally started.
And this is new. This is new sitcom, and it's bringing up the same shit that we all had to sit through stuff like Friends, to a lesser extent, but like stuff like Seinfeld, stuff like that. Like it's you know, so this is all the time. This is prolific. People are continuously getting these messages that it's okay to think that, you know, overweight women are unattractive, or to take the piss out of trans people, or it's all the time. It's in everything we consume. That people, when I said this to the person, they were just like, I've never noticed any of that. I was like, mate, it's like 10 seasons. Massive franchise, and it's in every single episode. Cringe. Because where's the next thing?
You know, when you just need some crap in the background that you're not really concentrating on. I'm not ADHD. I had to have stuff on in the background. I started Big Bang, even though I have problems with it from the start. I actually like Sheldon Cooper. I think he's the only redeemable character potentially on the whole show. Everybody else is trash and garbage and cruel. Yes. He has no, often when he's being malicious, you know he's being malicious, and he's not trying to hide the fact. But yeah, and it's in like the second episode or even the first episode, they refer to their old neighbour as a transvestite. And I was just like, I'm very uncomfortable right now. Like, and then they describe the actual person, and you're like, okay, that was a trans person or a drag artist. Like, it's not that old. And I was very uncomfortable.
I mean, not that the word transvestite doesn't get used anymore, or cross-dressing or anything like that. It's just the assumption that the person upstairs would identify or be that is
they sound like they were a drag queen. That's what they sound like, the way they describe their neighbour. And I'm like,
quite an old word.
They're a drag queen.
Using.
Great.
And I think also, you know, even if you don't know you're autistic, you're experiencing those things as well, and you're experiencing, you know, people seeing, because that's what happens if you don't even know you're autistic and you're trans. You know, the difference that people see, you know, and that can be really difficult as well, because you don't even know why it's happening.
Yeah, so it's just it's everywhere. So even when people are affirmed, I just, you know, it's God is everywhere. It's not this is not just a problem with research. This is like microaggressive violence towards trans people and autistic people everywhere.
And like I say, our community, although we are very diverse, there are lots of queer autistic people. There are still transphobic, racist, ableist autistics as well. We can't pretend that our community, because people, I sadly see it sometimes, particularly on Twitter, which is trash and going down the pan, as we all know. But, you know, seeing usually a cis straight white male autistic person, you know, defending indefensible actions and blaming it on being autistic. No, I
see it. I don't want to talk about this for too long, because I just think the woman is the most vile person on one of the most vile people on this planet. But J.K. Rowling, and the amount of people, autistic people, would say, "Oh, that's my special interest, and that was my." I couldn't give a shit. Like, I'm going to put it right plain here to you. J.K. Rowling is a piece of shit. She's ableistic, she's transphobic, and she's anti-Semitic. I don't care how Harry Potter saved you, and like, I don't care. Like, it's your feelings are not more important than trans people's existence. That's final. That's it. Like, there's no conversation around this. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I want to say that somewhere.
I want to read Grayson's, and then because I also want to read what Ricky Staines has said as well. So Grayson's just saying, you know, I struggled for a while about the concept of gender euphoria as an antonym to dysphoria, because it was drilled into me that I had to hate myself to be trans. No, I know, and it's just it's heartbreaking because you're like, no, beautiful trans person, no. Feel really bad about that because euphoria is obviously joy, and I want people to feel that.
But it's the medicalization of being trans, so it's the same for being autistic. I think was it Sam Harris who was on here a couple of months back? I think I was on the same thing as him. We were talking about ADHD and the DSM and kind of picking that apart about ADHD, and he was saying about the fact that he would never get a diagnosis because his ADHD isn't problematic enough for him to be able to get a diagnosis. And I think that would be the same thing for getting trans like gender affirming care, especially in the USA. Like if your insurance company are only going to do say you wanted top surgery or you wanted HRT or whatever it is, but they're only going to give that to you once you've been through 10 psychological assessments and they diagnose you with gender dysphoria. So you have to do a tick box. Then it says on your medical record for the rest of your life that you have gender dysphoria, and then the insurance companies might do something about it. They can still absolutely suggest that, say, top surgery would be something that is cosmetic. So you might have to go through the whole process again to be able to explain to your insurance company. All this time you're taking up all of this energy, it's zapping your mental health, your resources, your money, to go to different psychologists. Actually, some of the participants were talking about, I could go to a psychologist who was trans affirming. They don't know anything about autistic experience, or the other way around. They know a lot about being autistic, but don't really understand if I'm an autistic person. Why am I talking about being trans as well? So yeah, there's all these hoops to jump through, and then you have to get a gender diagnosis in order for anything to kind of come off that through insurance and stuff. And that's if you're even lucky enough to have insurance that kind of covers that thing anyways.
It's just so frustrating again, because it comes back to this thing that, we shouldn't have to be diagnosed to recognize that we're autistic and be appreciated for the fact that we're autistic. And it's very bizarre to say that you have to have your gender diagnosed. It does feel very much like the homosexual diagnosis in the old DSMs. It's, are we back there? Are we really back there?
Yeah, because if you look at like the idea of I probably am not going to say this word right at all, androgenophilia, which is, I was going to say old, but old medically, if nothing else, like the idea of what they would consider to be a woman who wants a penis because she is turned on by the fact of having a penis. So they're like sexualizing trans bodies. So like, and that was in the DSM until at least DSM-3. So yeah, it's just carrying on this idea of invalidation, and I think that's that's a big part of the reason that homosexuals and trans people, I mean, like we see with like we see with a lot of people, but like ADHD, who's Storytime UK drag queen, who's also ADHD, and she's had an awful lot of hate while she's been doing her book tour, her library tour. She's written 2 children's books. She's fantastic. And got this kind of people screaming all sorts of absolutely hideous stuff about her being a paedophile, being grooming children. And I just don't understand why, I mean, he's cis, why a man wearing a dress and makeup is in any way sexual. Like, I don't understand.
This is the thing. It's those.
I don't understand this step from looking a certain way to absolutely 100% that's sexual.
Sadly does tell us more about those individuals, that they're sexualizing something that doesn't have to be sexualized or isn't even sexualized. I think the thing that I did like about ADHD, so I flagged them. So ADHD drag, fantastic, lovely books as well, is seeing footage of the small number of protesters who are basically queerphobic, but the love actually for her, and seeing lovely small children just really loving seeing ADHD and saying, you know, that they need to be more drag in themselves as children, and you're just like, good, fantastic, beautiful,
amazing. Go back to that one comment that was Rick.
I think this is lovely. So Ricky Staines, an autism diagnosis can be a moment of understanding for many, myself included, but being diagnosed as a pathology didn't help me to feel proud or discover my neurodivergent identity. The community did. And we talk about that so much. This is why I'm saying, like, you know, even with my privilege of having a diagnosis, because it is a privilege, you know, in hindsight, we're now like, why do we need that? Why do it doesn't, it's not affirming, it doesn't give you answers.
But do you think that you came to the community, I keep saying the community as if we all know each other, but came to autism community because you were formally diagnosed?
No, I mean, to be fair, I was on the wait list and I came to group and met Annette and a number of other people, and I did a lot of the stuff, and then I had my diagnosis, and then I was like, I say it all the time, it was really anticlimactic, because I already knew, I'd already been looking into it with people who could actually answer questions like, why does my uvula annoy me all the time? I mean, you couldn't give me answers, but you at least could like pick it apart with me. You know, collagen differences are a thing, so your interoception is different. None of that comes up in the diagnostic you know, assessment. You even have a checklist part for the, you know, initial screening thing that's like, do you clear your throat often? I was like, yes, I do. No one will tell you why, though.
I didn't tell you why. I mean,
that's it. We'll take that.
I was diagnosed in 2010, and I had no clue. I didn't know any other autistic people. I didn't know anything about autism at the time. So for me, it did bring me to the community. It took a long time, and it basically. You know, that's why I ended up doing my PhD, because I just thought, well, I need to know more about this. I need to, you know, create a community. And that's kind of what happened with the PhD at the University of Kent with Chloe, who attended my workshops for my PhD. So, but yeah, I did come to the community through diagnosis, but that was a long time ago. And, you know, I think people my age, I'm a bit older than the two of you, I'm in my 50s, and people older, you know, there was a different understanding of what being autistic meant, or a person with autism, because that's all you ever heard. And I think it was harder to see through the stereotypes and realize that, oh, I might be autistic too. So it was very eye-opening for me, but, you know, really negative at first, because I didn't have the community, and it took me years to find the community, really.
I just want to flag, I know, because we've gone on for a bit, we might have to do the rest
we need to go,
of your research
it's 9:00
another time, because I am so hungry. But what I want to flag is the amount of love that we are having in the comments. It's been really lovely. So Grace is saying some lovely things here, and I wanted to flag, we had a lovely one from Tracy who says, Nick Walker and Annette have really helped me understand my gender identity. You know, you've been voicing, you know, and listening, you heard those trans people and non-binary people in your research. Like, that's so important. But yeah, there's been so much love in the comment section. Comments section.
Yes, I know. We have two more findings to do, but I think, we might have to do another session. Combine it with something else.
Katie's like, I can talk about trans stuff. What more?
I've been known to talk about it a little bit. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And I want to flag for people as well that if you weren't already aware, that we do have an LGBTQIA, an autistic LGBTQIA queer group.
Yeah.
It's quicker.
It's all the words, all the letters.
Yeah, we have a group. So if you know are part of the queer community in some capacity and autistic or ADHD or both, then you are more than welcome to come and join that space.
Or you're questioning either of those things as well.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
important. Yeah,
Being autistic or queer or both or whatever. Like,
yeah. If you're literally just at the start of just like,
maybe
I don't know, and you know, that is okay, because autistic people, obviously, or neurodivergent people can be very, very literal. So when you look at the group rules, I'm sure the group rules say something around the idea of exploring or questioning or something like that. I think they do. If they don't, and you're listening to this, you are welcome. Okay, as long as you're just thinking about it, that's absolutely okay. As long as you're not neurotypical and, you know, wholly cis and or straight, you're welcome in that space.
Careful. Yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah, but is there any ending key thing you might want to say, Kate?
Oh God, I went off on a total tangent. I tore everything down. I just said everything was shit. Yeah, I tell you, there was a really gorgeous quote that when I had to do not a Viva at the uni, but I had to do a presentation of this, and I left it with this quote, which I've now got to find. So I'm hoping it's somewhere easy to find. If not, I'll make something up.
That's fine. While you're doing that, I'm going to flag what we've got next week. Ooh. Next Wednesday, we have JSIC talking about autistic love. And so actually there's some crossover, because we're going to be talking about, you know, they're going to be talking about polyamory, for instance, a word that I didn't pronounce very well. You know, so and not just romantic love, it might be platonic love, and just the way it might be different when you're autistic. So talking about autistic love languages, like an autistic love language is, I found this interesting leaf, I thought you might like it. You know,
it's all wrapped up in autistic joy as well, isn't it?
Yes. So that's next week. Katie, did you find what you were looking for?
I did. It was from someone I called Greg, who's a trans man in the USA. And basically it was under like recommendations for future work. And this is what they said. I do not think that trans autistic stories are common enough. It's easy-ish to find them within the online autistic community, but I think that outside of that, general public never hears of them. There is also a lot of potential for research in this area that I feel is being overlooked because these stories are not as public. I think just having more trans autistic stories out there could be helpful and make it more accessible. More people should consider writing blogs or books or articles to share their stories. The more they're shared and discussed, the more I think people will be able to understand them. I feel like these stories are both complicated and very uncomplicated, like they are personally complex. It's hard to figure out our identity, but seeing the connections between autism and transgender experiences just seems simple to me. And I loved that. So I just wanted to, if I could end that with anything, like,
that's awesome.
Well, if anyone wants to read the dissertation itself that Katie did, it's Autistic Limited, so LTD, so autisticltd.co.uk/research/. I don't think you have to do the last /
because that's Katie's website, basically.
Yes. And then you'll find the actual research as well itself. Just go to Autistic Ltd, so limited.co.uk.
LTD is actually it's. Yeah, I know it's usually short for limited, but it's actually living the dream.
Living the dream.
I know that as well. I know what your page and
living
stuff
the dream.
is.
We just talked about it before. So.
And now that's just, it doesn't mean the same thing anymore.
Oh man.
And just because I want
to have a research section on Aucademy where we have, because I should, interesting.
Yeah. Katie's interested. Yeah, we can.
I'm interested because I didn't want to put it in with the blog because it's like 20,000 words.
Yeah.
Oh, can
But
I just
I'd like
add
to
as
put
well?
my
Like,
research up too.
I know that it's 20,000 words, and that obviously not everyone who wants to access it is going to like the citations and all the like really long words and long-winded methodology and all of that stuff. So I am working on a plain language version at the moment, which Chloe knows because I've been going, Chloe, does this make sense? I feel like Tanya Adkins I'm probably going to rope her in to help me with that, because that is a special skill set of hers. I'm also going to be working on like infographics. There's some more information that I've got from participants that I just didn't use, because I wrote 20,000 words, but quite frankly, when the information that you're given is so rich and so interesting, like you could write forever. So there's probably going to be some longevity to this. And also I am working on a article that will be published in a more typical manner because someone else will do it, on autistic people's experiences of accessing gender identity healthcare. So I'm hoping to get that published in the spring, but I'll keep everyone updated with that, obviously. So yeah, lots of exciting things going on. So yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. I'll share it all. Just want it to be accessed by as many people as possible. If you think, oh, that's really interesting, I know this person works with autistic people, or I know these people work with trans people, or whatever, just share it with everyone. It's not just for trans autistic people, like it's for everybody. So please just share it as much as you can if you think it's going to help people.
Fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I should probably share my PhD a bit more. I haven't really done that.
We can talk about yours at some time.
Yeah.
No, just like... So to wrap up, right at the end of 2 hours, I've noticed you've got different stimmies, and so I'm quite interested what stimmies you have right now. And I think that
Katie's
currently
frozen.
Katie is frozen, but hopefully will unfreeze. Well, Annette currently is like in one of my stimmies, which
I like it.
Is a squishmallow that
Chloe says it's a donkey or a
pony and a piggy.
pony. I think it has a mohawk, whatever it is. I don't know.
It's a pony and
it's definitely gender non-conforming pony.
Pinky. Yeah. So like the octopode that Inside Out. I've gone all blurred on the screen for some reason. We've definitely lost Katie. Oh no. Okay. Well.
I know they have a myriad of stimmy things on their table.
Yes, they had some like fantastic ones, but that's fine because I need to go and eat. So thank you, everybody. I don't know why we're blurred. That's very frustrating. But we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Looks for the outro.